Hey, this is Christian Buckley, and we're doing another MVP Buzz Chat, and I'm here with Heather. And Heather, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Heather Severino. I am a 2-year MVP for the Office Apps and Services. Focuses are OneDrive, OneNote, and Teams, and I'm based in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Now, I was going to say that, for OneNote, I know this is kind of a, for those of us that are on the Office Apps and Services side of things, I certainly think this, and I know a number of other people do, but the OneNote MVPs are kind of rock stars because that's an awesome app. And so coming from that background and working with that a lot, like I've blogged about it. Some of my most popular blog posts of the last 15 years of blogging have been around when I talk about OneNote and productivity specifically.
Yes.
I don't know. Do you feel like that, like the rock star because of the OneNote focus?
No, I try to be humble about it. I feel like I'm passionate about loving what that application can do for you, the tools that it has. I do think it's an interesting mixture of MVPs because we have so many that work in the education space related to OneNote being used in the classroom and now how that kind of ties into Teams for the classroom. And then we have more of the professional or trainers like myself that are working with OneNote to help in the modern workplace, to help everybody not take duplicate notes, maybe get away from that analog digital pen and paper and be working in a different way.
Now I have to say that obviously as you know, like real-time transcription services are far from perfect. But there's a couple things that I had started using with OneNote where, I never took touch type in high school, so I'm amazed that my kids can sit there, have a conversation and sit there and you hear this rattling noise and they have this, this thing typed out. I type with these fingers. I can do pretty well, but have to kind of focus. But so as I'm sitting in a meeting, a conversation, things that are going very quickly, things that I love about OneNote are like, doing the pen interface. My daughter who's in grad school, and so she has a Surface that she bought and uses her pen and takes the notes and has it then automatically, converted into text. But I then started to capture audio conversations, try to do the transcription, and I find that I spend about as much time going back and correcting the interesting transcription from that. And it's probably partially just because of the speed at which I talk and my Bay Area, as I was told in college, my Bay Area accent, where it's like the Bay Area people don't have an accent. Like, of course we do. We slur certain words together. We talk very rapidly, blah, blah. But anyway, So
are you mentioning the dictate feature as far as like dictating your notes in the mobile app, or?
I've actually not used in the mobile app that scenario, but just with if I'm sitting in, it's usually with my laptop or my Surface, sitting there and having the audio. So again, I've tried doing the transcription and it was faster. So while I don't type as fast, I type with fewer errors than a lot of people. And so it's faster for me to do that than the audio with the transcription and then to clean up.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I've been trying it out myself too, and I think where I run into a little bit of a hiccup is when I'm trying to end a sentence and then maybe start something new, or if it's more of a bullet list. So I think it works really well if it's just natural talking paragraphs of information. I've tried it out, and I think it's the Windows 10 app that I've been using it in more than anything else.
Good. Yeah. And more that is the same here. And it is one of those things where I think as the AIs, the machine learning, it improves, it understands your the corrections that you make and learns from that. I don't know how much they're investing in that, but I'm sure that it'll improve that area. But well, why don't you first let's kind of go backtrack a bit. So expand on you a little bit, like what you're working on, the things that are out there. So the MVP status, but what is the company and what you do for a living and the types of work that you do?
Sure. So I started in technology about almost 24 years ago while I was in college, and started out as a help desk person actually started a help desk for the local government I worked for, and became a desktop specialist, and then became a technical trainer. And from there, I moved on from government to working for NASCAR for about 10 years, doing the same thing, managing their help desk, formed a technical trainer.
How do you make the time for the rest of the world when you're not racing cars?
That's a good point. I don't know what you do. My greatest moment was when we got out on the track and I beat all the guys in my IT department. So I thought that was wonderful.
That is awesome. I am one of those people. I'm not too much of a car guy, but I was before I was married, I was a runner for a law firm. I did long distance runs for all the courthouses in Northern California. And so spent a lot of time behind the wheel, and I love road trips. I love driving, like that experience. And so I do think of myself, like, I could do that kind of things. But yeah. Even when you do like the little indoor racing, indie little tiny cars and stuff, it's pretty strenuous.
It is. Well, the most stressful point for me was getting out there and not have driven a manual shift car in over 10 years and afraid I'm going to stall this race car on pit road in front of everyone I work with. But
it's like a bike. You don't forget it. You warm up like that. One lap.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty. That's a bucket list item for me. So Thank you for being able to do that. That's very cool.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was a great time working there. And so then after about 10 years there, I started my own business, Teach You Tech, which I've had for about 4.5 years now. And my primary focus with that is helping organizations adopt new technologies and helping end users learn how to work with those technologies in an individual, productive way, as well as a group way, which is awesome to be able to work with teams now and really show them how that can tie in all of these services and tools into one place that they can work in.
So with the work that you're doing, I mean, do you see any obvious patterns or gaps in adoption and engagement? Because, I mean, hey, it's a popular topic. It's, as we know, working with enterprises, you can have the most wonderful, perfectly deployed and fine-tuned for the requirements solution. If end users aren't on there using it, doesn't matter how well you did in setting up the systems. So, I mean, what are some of the themes that you see around adoption and engagement?
The themes with adoption and engagement, right now, it seems like there's so many tools that have similar usage or similar types of functionality, right?
Are you talking about the which tool to use when problem?
Exactly. Is it Office 365 groups? Is it SharePoint sites? Is it Yammer Teams? We could go on and on. And then when it comes to working with task management and note-taking, is it OneNote? Is it To-Do? Is it Planner? Is it Outlook tasks? And how are these things integrating and what's missing? And so really kind of establishing what are those stop gaps for them initially and figuring out, okay, based upon that and based upon how you work, which tools would you embrace, and then getting them in there and working with those tools. The other big part, I think, is if they're not in those tools, like let's say Teams, for example, if they don't have that logged in, having the notifications set up appropriately so that they still are alerted if there's something that's directed to them or something that's important to them, right? So I think those are the two big things, is which tool to use when and knowing how to configure the settings, the notifications, so that if they're not in there all the time, they can still be kept up to speed.
Yeah, I just was thinking too, just slightly sideways, but with the whole the my analytics, being able to go and look at your own kind of personal productivity and what I'm spending this much time in email versus these other workloads, and not being able to see that roll up and across your organization necessarily, and being able to look at like as a manager, as a business owner, going and looking at remove names, anonymize the data, but look at where people are. That's actually really important to have that kind of insight as far as like adoption and productivity, to know,
right.
To know that, hey, we're having a problem. If more people were in using SharePoint in this way or using Teams for this, and,
right.
and our people aren't, and being able to see that. Yeah. I don't know. It's just an idea of like more data is good.
I think it's a great idea. And we do have that capability already in some of the applications. If you take, for example, Teams in the admin center, you can see which teams are being used more frequently, right? And another thing that I like in Power BI, the Power BI Online, the reports for that, you can pull a usage report and see which reports are they using? Where are they coming at this from? Is it the mobile view or is it the web view? And I think those analytics do help you kind of decide where you should spend more of your time focusing on
Right, but I mean, I guess my point there is that you have to aggregate that, go pull it from the various admin experiences and together. I mean, do you see in your work with organizations in adoption that they're going to those lengths, or are they using what's out of the box and then never really kind of looking across those workloads at that information?
I'm seeing that they're just going with the out of the box for now. When I do help end users understand my analytics and how they can set that up, and we take a look at that in the classroom environment, some of them don't want to know that information. I think that they'd rather be in denial than know how much time they're spending in meetings.
Well, but the other side, but that's, I think, part of the issue is to I think you've got to, I would say, I'm not going to speak for you, but
Right.
to communicate that, like, showing that you're in meetings 50% of the time isn't necessarily bad, because that might be the right volume for the job, the role that you have. And so
Exactly.
you can't compare everything together as being equal. For frontline workers, that might be a really bad thing, where they need to be actually in the applications doing the work rather than sitting in meetings.
Yeah. I think it's a definite culture shift, and getting them to understand, to look at it maybe with a different lens. And I usually have an example that I give. I used to work with a company that had a sister company, and all it felt like we did with projects was sit in meeting after meeting after meeting, and looking at how many hours we're spending in these meetings and how productive are we being on getting the tasks done.
You worked for Microsoft as well in the past?
Yeah.
That's about all I remember from my experience there, was sitting in meetings. But anyway, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So I think if you can get them to relate to that and understand, looking at those hours, it's a good thing. If you can set a goal to reduce the number of hours you're in meetings and spend that on something that's going to be, give you more revenue, why not? Why wouldn't you?
Something that I said, I don't know what set it off, but I have to whisper her name, but Cortana just instructed me something to do on my advice over there based on me talking about meetings, was giving me suggestions on productivity. I didn't hear what she said over there, but I want to say that she who must not be named, otherwise she'll talk loudly.
Yeah.
And there was some suggestions based around.
It's funny you say that. I was recording a course a couple weeks ago, late at night, and all of a sudden my Apple Watch, the same thing. Siri started talking to me in the middle of recording a course. I don't know what I said to set her off, but that had to be a retake once that was done.
And thankfully that did not trigger my device or anything. So again, the other she who must not be named. There's three of them in our house, Well, that's cool. So going back to like adoption engagement, I mean, any other themes that you're seeing around that? Because it's an important topic.
It is.
It's my background, the first third of my career spent in technical project management roles. Started as business analyst, moved into project management, and the last 18 years that I've been in more product management and marketing side of things. I mean, it's still been a reality. It's whether deploying technology or building it and marketing it, you do think about why are people not adopting? What can we do to get people so it's the change we're trying to make is sustainable?
Yes. So a few come to mind. One is Teams, when it's a developer environment. So if the company has a group of developers, they might already be working in Slack. So getting them to make that switch from Slack to Teams and helping them understand, if you already have Office 365, you can do so much from Teams that you can't currently do in Slack. You can work with your Outlook calendar items. You can get to your personal documents in OneDrive. You can still work together as a group and kind of customize it and work with the chat bots and everything else that maybe you have currently in Slack. So that's one challenge that I've found recently with a few companies. The other one is, how many teams, what do we set teams up for? And how many channels and tab apps do we put in there? Because we don't want it to be overwhelming and be too many. We want it to be easy to navigate. So that's been a common challenge, because one CEO I was talking with, he said, I just had a team for everything, for all the projects we were working on. He's like, and it's too much for me. Or I had a team for each project and it was too much for me. How do I consolidate that down? So that seems to be the other challenge. And the third is, how does all of this connect together, helping them understand what's going on in SharePoint? So where are their documents truly hosted, helping them understand how there's that connected integrations with all the service and apps that happen. Final one I would say is related to Microsoft Teams as well. These are the biggest issues that I've been seeing lately. How do we control them setting up teams? Do we want it to be the wild, wild west where they can create their own named teams, or are we going to have duplicate teams with similar names and some more active than others that we then have to manage? Or do we come up with some sort of an automated process that they can submit to create a team, and once it's approved, then it's generated for them? I don't know. Are you hearing the same things, Christian?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny that it's all a lot of the same conversations we had a decade ago around SharePoint as we were seeing the rapid growth of that, and you know, and so like a lot of you know, IT and just tech in general is cyclical. We see the same issues. We see new generation of workers coming in that don't know the history and repeat the same mistakes around this. We go through this again, and it's but similar thing. It's look, I mean, personally, I think that not understanding that how important information architecture is to teams and all of the workloads, especially now more and more that we're working cross workload. We always have. We've always worked. We've had Outlook Exchange. We've had the email stuff. There's SharePoint for the document collaboration, our intranets. There's now we have Teams for that. I like that kind of the phrase, that high velocity, but is the project-based, time-based specific, where the chat and the video like that kind of high touch scenarios needed. You have Yammer, that is the more of the outer loop conversation style. OneDrive I use extensively every day. I use OneDrive. And so now I have, and then there's all the tools and applications that plug in and work across those things. And so not having an understanding, and I think it touches on a lot of what you hit there too, is that the information architecture, to know about the naming conventions and how they apply that effects, to understand that, well, you've just now recreated by creating the teams here, and it created groups that sit between, here's what's plugged in, here's what's not, you're moving across, and you're striping your data all over the place, which is, it confounds search, it confounds the discoverability of content. It impacts who has visibility because they might be have access to it in some places, but not others. I mean, all of those kinds of issues. And I think organizations, it does come down to what you said. It's almost like you recommending, and you hate to say this, but lockdown provisioning, be thoughtful about the process of creating that. But it's almost like be slow on that process, thoughtful about it. Then once those in place, like go at it, people. Like in that, it's established, the structure is correct, so all the data is in the right places, but then go to it and we'll get out of your way. Yeah,
I think that's what's needed. Yeah, I agree with you. I think that if you can kind of at least have a naming convention and hold the permission there of setting that up for them, but let them go set their channels up any way they want. Let them set up the tabs, the apps within the channels any way that they want. Keep it more of an agile Kanban kind of a way that if that's how they need to work, that they can do that.
Yeah, because the other side of it too that is addressed less often, but I think is the reality that we're seeing more and more now as like more mature SharePoint organizations are moving over and adopting Teams. They're saying, well, now that we have the ability to go in and link what our new team to the SharePoint assets and sites, and kind of bridge those gaps. So it's not just every time you're spinning up a new team, it's creating a new group, it's creating new SharePoint, it's all everything else that you're actually be able to go and shift and move things around. I think that is also forcing organizations to be more thoughtful about that process. Kind of forcing Microsoft to go and look at it versus the Wild West approach, which it largely has been the last couple of years.
It has. It's interesting. I was speaking with someone, this was about 5 or 6 months ago, and at that point Teams had been out about 1.5 years, and he was attending an online session with me, and he said, yeah, when we found out about Teams, we went out there to see what it was all about, and we discovered there were already 2,000 teams created within our organization. And he was from IT. He said, so then we had to kind of figure out, what do we do with all these teams? So you definitely don't want to be in that scenario. You want to
Yeah, it's
Plan for it ahead of time.
if you think you're not in that scenario, then it's because you've not looked closely enough, because everyone's in that scenario.
Exactly.
It's like somebody was saying, it's like, well, what about was arguing the point of like the shadow IT concept. It says, but if you're an organization that's all Office 365, you really don't have the shadow IT thing. I'm like, yeah, sure. So if you're using Office 365, then no one has Dropbox or Box or Google Drives or iCloud. Nobody has apps that aren't authorized loaded on their phones or their systems that could have an impact on your system. Like I don't know what the color of the clouds are in that person's world that thinks that, but it sounds like a happy place. So.
It does.
Well, Heather, so I mean, anything else that you have going on now? Anything that do you have, like your content out there, videos? We'll say also, like, how can people get in touch with you? But any resources that you can point people to, or even favorite resources that you just highly recommend people take a look at.
Well, I do author content for Microsoft Office courses for many different online providers, including Clip Training, Pluralsight. You'll also find a lot of courses on lynda.com and LinkedIn Learning. I have one that just released a couple days ago, which is OneNote for Windows 10. So if you need to learn how to work with that, I highly recommend that Essentials course. But several topics, including OneDrive, SharePoint, OneNote, PowerPoint. Some new courses will be coming out in the next few months on Dynamics 365, Planner, and Power BI online. So look for those. You can find me usually at a lot of conferences. Some of the conferences I know, Christian, you and I have attended the SharePoint North America conference and Microsoft Ignite. So I usually try to be there to speak, help out in the various booths. You can look for me online on Twitter. You can find me at Heather Severino. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well.
Excellent. And Heather, I know that there's a lot. I was actually, I think there's a whole other conversation we could have about the differences between the two OneNote versions. I'll just say that if you don't know what we're talking about, the Windows 10 version of that, it's the one that has the richer purple than the other application. I think it's, we maybe need to go and get a couple folks together just to sit and talk about OneNote, because I think there's a lot. We should. I think there's a lot we could talk about, and as far as all the other apps now too, they're kind of connecting into that have to do with task management and note taking within Office 365 and Windows 10. There's a lot you can do with that now. Yeah, it's rough if you're those Microsoft, the product team that has to work on such an awesome product that has such great, huge fanboys out there and stuff. It's Anyway, it's a part of my daily life. So is use OneNote. So I'm definitely a huge fan. So
me too.
Well, Heather, thanks a lot for your time, and we'll let you get back to your day. But thanks a lot for talking.
Thanks, Christian. Bye, everybody.